have a very, very good panel with us over here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of introduction, and then hand over the mic to the panel. The conversation we are going to have today is on art patronage. And it is with the help and association of Iram Art Gallery, Harsh is right here with us, that we've been able to put this together. This fireside session will engage and inspire young art collectors and enthusiasts from Gujarat, focusing on Mrs. Lalbhai's journey as a collector and a museum trustee, and Mr. Roy's as an artist and educator. The session aims to be engaging, intimate, and inviting, focusing on their personal journeys, insights, and the challenges they've encountered. So we have with us Mrs. Jayashree Lalbhai. She's an educationist and director of Rachna School in Ahmedabad. Her work emphasizes holistic education, combining life experiences with academics. She's a trustee of Jyoti Sangh, Kasturbhai Lalbhai Museum, and Lalbhai Dalpatbhai Museum, focusing on education, culture, and rural development. A practitioner of heartfulness, she integrates spirituality into her daily life. Then we have Professor Indrapramit Roy. He is a distinguished contemporary artist and educator, has exhibited extensively in India and internationally, including Macau, Cairo, and Bangkok. An MFA graduate from MSU Baroda and London's Royal College of Art. He has been teaching painting at MSU since 1995, while contributing to art through exhibitions, writing, and illustration. We have Satyajit Dave, who is the Chief Curator and Head at Iram Learning Initiative, who's going to be moderating this panel. Satyajit Dave brings over a decade of multidisciplinary expertise in the intersections of art, design, craft, and indigenous knowledge systems. As a curator, educator, and cultural researcher, he has led landmark projects, including the Print, Matter and Matrix, and Synaptic Odyssey, promoting sustainable practices and advancing South Asia's art ecosystem. We are really thankful for all of you to be here, and I will hand over the session to Satyajit.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah, thank you, Vivek, thank you so much. Thank you for agreeing to do this and share your experience with us. I'll jump straight into it, ma'am.
Sure.
We'd love to know your journey of how you kind of, got into art, and what keeps you going, because you do so many things.
Actually, my journey into art was quite incidental, in the sense that as a young girl, my exposure was just what I saw in museums, someone's home. And when I got married, and the first home that we made, my husband and myself, we started looking for some art. I think lots of people start collecting art that way, looking for something for their own homes. And my brother-in-law was my architect, and he was the one who introduced us, Jitendra Mistry, to the world of contemporary Indian art. And he took us to various artist studios. I still remember my visit to Akbar Padamsi's studio, and I was quite fascinated, because that was the first time I've seen an artist in his milieu. We picked up one of my favorite paintings from him. But then along the way, buying this initial art opened our eyes to wanting to go to galleries, opened our eyes to seeing things that we found beautiful. And even though the walls in my house got filled, that feeling of ye dil mange more didn't end. And it was that initial enthusiasm. We bought so many things that we liked. That was the basic premise. And looking back today, there's some that I still like, and some that I wonder what rubbish did I pick up. But I think picking up that rubbish also was part of the journey of who I am today. And I think it is essential to have someone pick up something that is not really what everyone calls worth it. I personally believe that art collection should not only be about art that is worth it, but more about art that you like. And as you grow and mature as a person, There are things you yourself stop liking, and then newer things you start liking. So, in the journey of developing yourself as a person who eventually appreciates art, I think we need to go through this journey. A lot of us feel threatened that I don't know what to buy, and therefore we always rely on some expert opinion or something like that. That's also good. But once you do that, the painter you have selected, I think it's important that we invest a little more in understanding what he has done, who he is. Because there's so many artworks of mine that I bought thinking this is it and I love it. And yes, my interpretation of that art is very important. But when I met the artist and he told me what he had uh, really put on that artwork, I understood it in a different dimension. It kind of enriched my understanding of what expression can be. So, though somebody says, I remember this huge painting I have of an artist called V. Ramesh. We just bought it instinctively, we loved it. But when I met him, I see that painting today very differently. So, in this journey, I would like to say that even if your choice is not approved by others, go ahead.
Okay, ma'am, just as a continuation to that, you run three institutions, like three museums now, in various capacities. Of course, you've pushed it. How does that shape
Let
your
me tell
collecting
you, all
habits?
three museums came about with different motives. The first one, let me talk of the oldest one, the Lalbhai Museum. It was never meant to be a museum. There was a Jain monk called Muni Punya Vijayji who had 80,000 manuscripts, which he asked our grandfather Kasturbhai Lalbhai that I would like you to make an effort to preserve these. So at that time, Dadaji approached Doshi to build an iconic building to house these manuscripts. It still stands there, testament to uh, Doshi's efforts, of course. And so the primary purpose was to look after these manuscripts. Then I don't know how many of you have heard of a lady called Madhuri Desai. She was one of the earliest, what you call, patrons of art. She had a beautiful home on Breach Candy in Mumbai. She was the daughter-in-law of Lalbhai Desai. And she was so much into art, she made her home a studio, a residency for young artists in a time, I mean, where was this? In 1930s. And when she passed, she left her entire sculpture collection to Kasturbhai Lalbhai to look after. Now, he said, now how do I look after this? So then he asked Doshi to create an extension to that Indology building where we started with housing Madhuri Desai collection. And after that, many people started just giving their collections here to look after and to keep open to the public. So that institution is mainly one which has come up with the, what do you call, donations of others. We are just custodians. And then in the 30s, the Tagores, Abanindranath Tagore, Gaganendra, and their third brother, they were in financial distress. They wanted to sell their entire collection, but no one in India was interested. And there were a lot of interest from abroad. And because we were under the British rule, I think to be British, to be a little foreign was something that we aspired to be in that section of society. So there was a lot of interest in art from abroad, but nothing which was, and they wanted the whole collection to go as a whole. Finally, one of my aunts who was married in the family, she convinced Dadaji that we can't let this go abroad without seeing a single painting or a sculpture. He bought the whole collection and brought it to Ahmedabad. So he's not a collector in the collector sense, but he is a person who has preserved our heritage for us. And for that, I don't know how we really need to thank him. 50% of that collection is with the LD. At that time only he said, because we didn't have the wherewithal to look after it. And some of it is now up at the Kasturbhai Lalbhai Museum in Shaibagh. Now that museum also came up as a in a very unusual fashion, in the sense that it was our old ancestral home, which is about 120 years old now, falling apart. So we approached Rahul Mehrotra to help us restore that building for ourselves. In the process, we realized that if we don't use that building, it's going to go back to the shambles that all unused buildings go back to. So we are thinking what to do, what kind of activity should we have here? And many suggestions, B&B. Now B&B is not in something that I am really comfortable with. And then when we were emptying the house for renovation, all these boxes of the Tango collections had to be shifted. And at that time we decided, why keep them in boxes? Why not bring them out? Why not display them? So that's how we opened our home to the public to come and see the antiquities which came through the Tago collection. So we have not added anything to it. So in that sense, we are not collectors. Again, I say we are a custodian of that collection which came to us. I have not added. I don't intend to add to it because I'm not really one to understand whether I'm getting the right thing for the collection or not. So I think my role there is limited to being a custodian of that collection. And we had a second building for which I had an idea that we will bring various shows. Like at the moment, we have brought the Tapi collection to our museum. And when we opened, everyone said, you'll keep these halls empty. Why don't you fill it with your art which is in storage? So we decided, let's put our art out there till we get another show for the city of Ahmedabad. In that process, my husband went overboard. He picked up the best pieces from my home and put them in the museum. I was so upset. My drawing room, which had this favorite Akbar Padamsi of mine, it was, like a statement, a huge painting. It went away to the museum. My house became empty. And I said, Sanjay, what are you doing? He's saying, Jayashree, if you want to do something, do it well. So a lot of my art went there. And I agree with him today. I'm happy we did it because the kind of reaction we got of people who came to see it. Nobody comes to our home, we are not very social people. So besides us, nobody saw those paintings. And when we brought them to the museum, they had such an appreciative audience. It really felt good. So my museums have a kind of a different role for me. They are also a role in which my school is my major activity, and to educate my students for me is of paramount importance. Educate not for the 3 hours, but mainly for just becoming sensitive to the world. And when we opened the museum, we had so much artwork, and I didn't know how we'd explain it to the visitors. So I trained about 20 of my students from the 9th standard to be docents. And the enthusiasm that I encountered when these children took up this project was unbelievable. They went beyond the brief. I mean, I had prepared a little thing that they have to say about the painting, but they went all out. And it has sparked a kind of interest in students in my school today, that in their summer project, which is a compulsory part of their education, 40 out of 80 students every year choose to do their internships in our 2 museums. So I feel so fulfilled that this one little exercise has sparked a kind of interest that I feel is important part of education. Our children come from a modest background. Families are from modest backgrounds where possibly their homes don't have artwork. Like I also came from a family where there was no real artwork on the walls of my home. But these children are now going to see the world differently. Their parents cannot take them, or parents cannot buy art, but they can see, appreciate, and explore the world of art. So I want my museum to really be a conduit to open eyes for the younger generation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for so many of these different anecdotes that you kind of shared with us. So your journey has been quite interesting. As students, by the way, he was a professor when I was studying at MSU. So we've heard a lot of stories of your college time and your theater and a number of other things. But what we're very keen to know is that because you teach, you practice, you've shown your work at various places. You've also traveled the world extensively as an extension of your practice. What got you into art and what keeps you motivated after so long?
Well, that's rather easy to answer, actually. What got me into art is that I was exposed to the arts from a very early age. My father was in theater all his life, in the non-professional theater, and he was part of a group called Bahurupi, which was established in 1948, and it's still active. The first exposure to the arts for me was theater, but he was also a man who very firmly believed that theater is an additive art. So it requires a bit of sculpture, a bit of music, bit of painting, everything. It's tilottama shilp. So it's something that is built out of all these things. So unlike many theater people, he had great interest in visual arts. So I was exposed to visual arts, and I would be drawing and painting from a very, very early age, as far as back as I can remember. So that way I was very fortunate. We were not very well off. We come from a really middle class parentage, but they believed in that Gandhian principle of simple living and high thinking. So I was surrounded with books. I was surrounded with beautiful reproductions, and I was exposed to a lot of good art. And I think it was, I don't know, I made up my mind pretty early that I'll be an artist, and obviously there was no resistance. So it's not a story of me struggling against my parents or anything like that. I segued into art rather simply, easily, as it should be. When the time came to decide, I will share this anecdote because after my 10th, I was very keen to join an art college. And my father, the only time he intervened and said that, why don't you finish your 12th and then decide what you want to do? And I followed his advice because, he wasn't resisting me, but he said, just do 2 more years. And I did it like, who wants to study philosophy and political science and God knows what, and geography and history? I was good in my studies. So it was okay. And now, when I am teaching for almost 3 decades, I realize that all those things have been quite crucial, and they all come back very useful. So anyway, after my 12th, I decided, but that was also a time when I was torn between 3 things because I was a bit of a jack of all trades. I did a bit of acting, I did a bit of theater, then I fortunately had this role that fell on my lap of working with Satyajit Ray in his movie. So, and a lot of people were saying, oh, you should join acting, follow your father's footsteps. But somehow I was quite decided that I'm going into the visual arts. And I didn't like the film world very much. One film and you are like mobbed. This is not the life I want. I want to have my chai in the lari. I want to be able to go and look at books and stuff without getting, people hanging around for stupid autographs. What does my autograph mean? So that actually helped me to win that off the list. And I stuck to my ground and not a day of regret. As for teaching is concerned, that is also an interesting story because when I was studying, I did 5 years in Shantiniketan, then I moved to Baroda for 2 more years, and then I was in this city for a year on a fellowship that Kanoria Center used to give. So I lived in the SEPT campus, and then I got the INLAC scholarship to study at the RCA. um, one of my fellow students said that you will come back to Baroda. And I said, Pagal, I'm not coming back to Baroda. It's a small town. I have had enough of it. I've learned what I have to learn. I'll come back to meet my friends during Navratri maybe, but that's about it. Goodbye. I'm off. And I went away, I came back, and then I was staying in Cholamandal Artist Village. I started my professional life there. One fine day, I get a call from Dumal saying that, and you know Dumal, his typical gruff way of saying that. You want a job, you want to apply? There's an opening there. It was a temporary job. And I thought, well, I've survived as a professional artist for about 3 years. Let me give it a shot. I always had that thing that I never thought I would teach, but what I did have, I realize now looking back, is that desire to share things. So when I was traveling very extensively in Europe, because I was on a very good scholarship which offered me a month of travel every year, and I took the most of it. Then my college was very helpful and I got an Erasmus exchange program. So I spent 3 months in Paris, 3 months in Berlin. So, and wherever I went, I was collecting slides madly. Those were the days of the slides, if you remember. There's become the Gaikwadi Jamani ki baat ho gayi hai. And I don't know why I was collecting them, because I was spending a large chunk of my budget. They were quite expensive. For a student to acquire those things. And I just went on buying things from medieval, pre-medieval, Renaissance, post-Renaissance, modern. And what got me going was that I'm seeing all these things and I have a responsibility to share them with others. Because in Baroda, in our Western history classes, Parimu sir, Ratan Parimu sir, would be doing a great job. And there were other teachers. But unfortunately, the slides, many of them were discolored. And so you're listening about Titian's color and you're looking at a slide which barely has 2 colors to show, blue and magenta. And you wonder, what is the color of Titian? And while I was studying, Bhanu Padamsi came back from abroad and bought a bunch of slides, fresh slides. And there were a few Titians and other Renaissance masters. And Parimu sir was overjoyed and he projected in the class, and then for the first time you realized that, wow, this is the color he's talking about. So that was there at the back of my mind that I want to share this. And I collected this whole bunch of things. They were lying with me in Chennai. I didn't know what to do. So when Dhumal sir said that, want to join? I said, okay, give it a shot. I came. And I was still thinking that, well, this will be a gig. I'm there for 11 months, 10 months at most. Then I'm off. But one thing led to another, and here I find myself in Baroda. I've become an honorary Barodite. And this is my 29th year of teaching. So that's how it happened. It is not planned, but I do see a pattern which was there, with me being completely unaware of it. So it caught me unaware.
As an extension to that, we are one of the few rare species of artists and practitioners and professors who teaches and practices at the same time. And that has its own set of advantages, and I'm sure disadvantages as well. But what I'm keen to know is, how does your teaching inform your practice and vice versa?
Well, to begin with, I'm very fortunate to have teachers who have set that example. I had 2 great teachers in art school, and both of them were practicing in their own ways. One is a gentleman called Gautam Chaudhary, who's still living. He's a cancer patient and still working. The other was Sumitra Narayan, who happens to be the sister of Shyam Benegal, who studied in Shantiniketan under Nandalal Bose. And she worked in the Constitution. That I recently discovered. I had no clue. We did all kinds of badmashi in our class. I would have thought twice about that had I known. But, with such people to begin with, and then I moved to Shantiniketan. There were Shanatkar, Lalu Prasad Saw, Somnath, who had just retired, Mani Saab was there in the campus. So Mani Saab went back to Shantiniketan in 1980. I joined Shantiniketan in 82. So that's where I met him first. So these were the examples you knew about Ramkinkar, Vinod Bihari. Of course, there are people who teaches and does not practice, but I never took them seriously. So these were the sort of role models. So that again came naturally, and I made it a point. And it is difficult to juggle these two rabbits of a full daytime job and a practicing career. So what I had to give up on is sleep. I'm perpetually sleep deprived, and I doze off every now and then. But other than that, I think it is absolutely necessary to be to be able to teach. You need to have a practice. Otherwise, what do you teach? I am not teaching what I taught people 5 years back or 10 years ago. You are evolving because you are bringing your practice into it. Now, having said that, teaching is also a creative profession because you're dealing with a lot of people who are coming there with stuff in there. You know, I'd never believed that teaching is about filling in empty vessels with my gyan. I can't do that. So I kind of cringe when people say in Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu. I don't want to be Guru Brahma, not Vishnu. I just want to be a fellow colleague who had started his journey a few years early. And obviously what I have to share, the most precious thing that I can share with my student is my experience. And guide them to find themselves, their own voices. Nobody comes like a blank slate. Everybody comes with something. My job is to see to it that flowers. So for that, you are constantly changing modes, and it's a very one-to-one kind of teaching. So it's very difficult to teach art in a large class, where you come and deliver a talk from the podium. That is not how it works. You have to have one-to-one connections. You have to figure out what is the individual strength is. And to do that, see, there are two ways. There is a shortcut, there is a long cut. I've always chosen the long cut. The shortcut is that you do it and you can actually get away with doing very little. Or you can invest in each one of them, which takes a toll. But it's a toll worth taking, and I have no regrets.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. To kind of bring now, this is established that you guys bring in decades of experience of working, practicing around the Indian art market. Over the years, ma'am, what are the changes that you've noticed or witnessed within the arts ecosystem from the time that you began till like now?
I really cannot answer this one because I don't even notice it. I haven't really experienced it. I don't really go out into an art market as such.
Sure.
So this is one thing that when you even sent me the question, I've said, don't understand.
Okay.
So I'll pass this one if you don't mind.
Sure, ma'am. Sir?
Quite a few actually. And everybody says, oh, our time was the golden period. Everything is going down there. Don't buy this crap. I think there are so many more challenges that somebody who walks into the world of visual that faces now. And I'm astounded by the kind of skill, the kind of understanding they bring. What I do miss, I'm not the one to mince words, is that in my time there were people who had a general interest in the arts, more such people who would be interested in films, in poetry, in literature, and associated arts, dance, everything, and along with visual art. Those were the people found a refuge in art colleges because they had nowhere else to go. Increasingly, what you see is a little more specialization. So people are very driven that they want to be a visual artist, and those are the people who come. So I do miss that wide area of interest, and people are very focused. So if you ask a student that, why didn't you go and watch that wonderful film, and they would look at you askance that why is sir asking us to look at a film? We are visual artists, we are not filmmakers. Or why does he want us to read? I'm not going into literature. But I feel every artist needs to have an area of interest outside his immediate, or his or her, or theirs, um, area of work, because that enriches them. Otherwise, it becomes too narrow a focus. So that is something that I do feel happening increasingly. But considering the kind of challenge, I mean, in our time, if I had WhatsApp and Reels and Facebook and Instagram, the jack of all trades that I was, I would devote even less time to my work. I mean, I just scraped by in my earlier years. So the fact that they are distracted, their attention span has shrunk. People actually read less these days. Books, though, become very secondary. If you read at all, you read on screen. Those things have happened. There are changes. But the challenges have also increased multifold. So, and I firmly deny that our days were golden days and this is the bad days. No, that is not the case at all. I think that students now come with much more focus. What has happened is the space of higher education has been facing all kinds of challenges because we have policymakers who are formulating policies without consulting stakeholders. And that is a different ballgame altogether. And I can go on and on and about that. But I don't want to go there because that's not the question. The question being, how do I manage and what change do I see? I see a great deal of change, but I also see a great deal of hope and also find enormous challenges being met by students every day. I'm very happy to say that they do meet the challenges head on, at least the good ones, that's always the case. But even the bad ones, or even the ones who are not so good, if they take away something from the learning, after all, whoever passes a degree in painting or sculpture or whatever in visual arts does not necessarily become a practicing artist. So in that sense, we are not a professional course. Everybody who comes to us, we have no moral responsibility to churn out artists. 20 people came and 20 artists went out. No, it doesn't happen like that. So maybe 5 of them will stick around and be artists of. But then of the remaining 15, you find that 3 of them have gone into teaching in some remote village. 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, somebody comes and says, सर मैं छोटा उदयपुर के एक गांव से आ रहा हूँ, किसने बताया आपको फाइन आर्ट्स के बारे में? मेरा एक टीचर है जिन्होंने यहाँ पढ़ाई किया. Now I think those people are very essential to the art environment because without them I wouldn't have had these students. So there is a whole, I mean, we only see the top of the iceberg. 2/3 of it remains under the water. And I think a lot of our students actually also be part of that invisible segment. Or no matter where they go. I mean, I have had students who've gone into cinematography, who've gone into scenography, who's gone into design, who's gone into animation, and they've done well. Public art, all kinds of things. So it is not something which is specific that you count your success by counting the chickens who have laid golden eggs. There are people who seemingly hasn't laid any eggs but have actually done quite a bit of service. They're invisible, they're quiet, they're not celebrated, they're not famous, but they're there and they're providing a very essential service.
Yeah.
Also, whilst you were talking, sir, I felt that today, from the time I started my foray into art, today a lot of technology has entered the art field, and there was a time I didn't understand much of it. Performance art, all those things were a little difficult for me to relate to. But as I am going more and more into it, I kind of enjoy it. understand it. Is this artist Ranbir Kaleka, whose work we had picked up. Initially, I felt कि ये क्या है? But I am getting, the more you expose yourself, you feel a little more connected. That's what I feel. So there is that kind of opening up of technology into this field.
Yeah. I'm often asked that, is this the death knell for painting or the traditional kinds of arts? Again, this comes from a deep sense of insecurity. I don't think art moves like that. Technology has always helped art.
Yes.
And you have to take it in that spirit. And it is there, and you can't deny it. And there will be people who are taken by technology. There will be people who are experimenting in new media. But does that mean the death for old media? No, I don't think so at all. And gives all the more reason why old media also has its power. But technology and art is something that is joined at the hips. I'll give you just one chota example. You all know about Impressionist and that how Impressionism took paintings outdoors, plein air painting. How did that happen? One is, of course, the theory of color that, that the light has 7 colors and all that. The other, of course, is the invention of the pouch. Before the tube came, there was the pouch, a pigskin pouch in which small amounts of paint could be carried out. Other than that, you have a huge studio setup, you have 15 assistants making paint in large quantities, you save them, there is no way of take them out and make a small painting. When you have the pouch with a ivory lid, you could actually carry the paint outdoors. So that's technology. Without that, there is no Impressionism.
Okay, sorry, I was just a bit lost in that. Yeah, no, so.
You want me to go on and on?
On a side note, there was a time when, there were 4-5 of us, we were having a conversation with Sir right outside the painting department. There's like tea and cigarettes that's constantly like flowing, and we realized it's been 6 hours that we've been sitting and having a conversation with him, and lo and behold, none of us realized that. No, but
is that a compliment or?
I think
6 hours
for a student to say he's lost in time, it is.
we didn't realize, so it's actually a compliment. Had we realized, it would not have been a compliment.
I'm having second thoughts.
Parimu sir I'm sorry I'm digressing, but Parimu sir had very famously said once, he's like, I'm badnaam for taking long lectures, but now you have to tolerate it because now there's no option left for you anymore. So no, but coming back, ma'am, you spoke of education and, a number of things, how you involve school students as a part of, the museum workings and things like that. What any future goals with regards to, what you want to do maybe further in that particular space for the museum?
I don't know about that, but you talked about the 3 museums. I left out one because I wanted to come back to it. The third museum that we are working with, it's called the Arvind Indigo
Yes.
Museum, where my husband started working with the dye indigo in I think 80s, late 80s, when the textile industry in Ahmedabad was dying. We had about 92 mills which all closed down, save 2-3. And we had to think out of the box. At that time, we brought manufacturing of denim here. So in a way, indigo saved us. And Sanjay is very attached to the dye. But now he felt, when he's been so much part of this art world, he said, can I take this dye beyond the fabric and extend its vocabulary to other kind of mediums? And so we started working with artists. So that you had this thing, do you work with young artists?
Yes.
Because all those people whose art we had really acquired, we spoke with them, would you be interested in working with this new medium. You decide what you want to do, you decide the kind of material you want to use. Our company will research and create the medium with which you can work with. So today we are working with young upcoming artists who are ready to experiment, and say somebody says, I want to impart indigo to aluminum. Our company creates the material to do that, so that an artist is facilitated to express himself in his medium, but we will do the technology for him. So this is a kind of an experiment, a co-creation, which we are enjoying a lot. So that's one other kind of work we would like to do, where young enthusiasts can also be part of the process. And when we just started the museum, we had organized one course called Contemporary 101, where we had got some luminaries from the art industry to come and hold this 2-day workshop. We had Shiva Kumar from Antiniketan, then we had Suresh Jairam, we had I forget the names now, Girish Sahani. So we had a nice motley of people coming to talk to us, because I wanted to know. I had zero background. And going through that journey with them, the way they talked, what they did, was very informative and quite enlightening for me. And I think something like that, my museum, if it can host something like this for people, is something I would like to do again.
So, any recommendations, suggestions on how colleges could foster a better ecosystem, like they're doing this for emerging artists, giving the right technological input and giving the right kind of a
Yesterday, I
setup?
met a former student
Yeah.
of mine at an exhibition. He said that I'm working in this Indigo project. So
Oh, okay.
obviously, there are people getting
I'm
attracted
very happy.
in
So,
work.
I mean, there was a phase wherever we went in the world, Sanjay will only talk about that. I said, is this holiday about only your indigo? And I never ever thought that it will really result in anything.
Yes.
But he was so persistent and he was so obsessed that it happened, it became a reality. I'm glad today looking back, but at that time I used to feel how many hours are just going on, just wherever we went, we only talked of this. But his persistence paid, and I think it's a unique experiment, giving rise to a lot of creativity. So I'm happy about it.
Talking about the ecosystem, yes, a lot can be done. But to begin with, one of the precondition of that would be to have a certain autonomy to do it. Unfortunately, and this I say with a lot of sadness, because I've been working in the government sector, but I never felt that it was a government sector in the first 10 years, because Baroda is technically a state university. It's not even a central university, but de facto it has always been a national center. But certain changes have happened, which kind of makes me sad, because that character is under strain. Strain because of certain policies that are put in place, which I think is detrimental to it. Also, I think increasingly we have an education bureaucracy, which the bureaucracy feels that they know best, and they can bypass the teachers, people, the stakeholders, students, anybody who's into this. So often you have ready-made solutions that are airdropped on you, asking you to fit in, which I find is very disrespectful and detrimental. But having said that, within the art college space, yes, it can be done, it should be done, because nobody works in silos.
Yes.
Even within colleges, I go to some colleges where, one department student doesn't even know who the other department students are, let alone having interactions, which I think is pathetic. That's not how, I mean, you have great big nomenclatures of multilingual, ये वो nomenclature में बहुत कुछ हो गया. But when it comes to actual practice, I think there is always room for more of that. And the best, in my view, is to take away this whole discipline-based model that we have.
Sure.
And this has been under the discussion. Mani Saab himself mentioned this. Sheikh Sir, Ghulam Sheikh also talks about this, that a model should be more on a workshop model, because these medium-centric departments, that a painter only deals with painting and a sculptor only deals with sculpture, those days are gone. People should freely be able to move from one to the other. And the degrees they get should be a little more generalized than very specific. Now, of course, there will be people who are focused in a focused area. There will also be people who are multidimensional and wants to work in multiple registers. And there should not be, I always believe that there should not be any barrier to that. So yes, within art colleges and inter-art college and intra-art college, in both teaching, and even spaces that are not art colleges. It is always better to have people. So we have introduced things like internship programs where our students go out and learn from things. But you see, bureaucracy makes it difficult. We had somebody, I'll give you an example. We had somebody like Gyarsilal Verma, who had no graduate degrees, came from a traditional muralist family of Rajasthan. Mani Saab was instrumental in getting, and he joined as a studio assistant. The university was refused to take him as a teacher, but he was a teacher of the highest order. Of a very high order, if not the highest order. So eventually, there was not of nudging, goading. He retired as a lecturer, which he should have been much earlier. But to get a people like that into teaching now, with these bureaucratic norms being framed, which are very tight, in the name of quality control, has actually tied our hands and made things more difficult. Because there are certain standards set, and if you don't allow for exceptions, creative institutions find it very difficult to function. And this is something that is very hard for bureaucrats to understand. Because for them, this is on paper, this is what you followed. As far as papers are clean, everything is fine. It is not. Often that is not the case. When you actually sit down in an interview, talk to people, that person sitting opposite you may not have the right kind of papers, but you instantly realize that he will be or she will be the right fit. But then your hands are tied. So you don't have that elbow room.
Yes.
So I wish we had looked into that. We still have opportunity of looking into that, but the powers that be should listen.
My last question before we wrap up the session to you, ma'am. Any advice for younger collectors, younger people wanting to get into art?
I think to try and get into the depth of it, try and meet people a little more than just buy art, for sure. Like every time you mention Ghulam Muhammad Saab, whenever he comes, he always takes out some time to visit my museum, though he's been there before. But I insist that I should be with him because every time he says something about a particular painting, it's something that I come to know a little more about. For me, meeting with a person really, I think, is very important to understand what really happens. Like, just being a buyer is completely a no. Try and
So,
Any
Couldn't
advice
agree
for?
more. Couldn't agree more. You know, whether you are a collector, whether you are, like she said, custodian, one has to approach art with a little humility. If you approach art with, I know everything, it's very self-defeating. Because the more you look at it, the more you read about it, the more you know about it, you realize you only know very little. No matter what people around you are saying. And that humility you should hold on to. If you let go of that, your curiosity goes. And curiosity is the first and foremost thing that one needs to have to appreciate art. Otherwise, we are all talking about deja vu, we are talking about following a herd, that ये 5 लोगों ने तो ये, जैसे if you go to a shop, people would say, आप ये ले जाइए, बड़ा fashionable है. You know, सभी लोग इसी पे जा रहे हैं. You have to use your discretion. So if you stop using your discretion, and where does that come from? That comes from the lack of sense of wonder.
Yeah.
So if you're not really wonderstruck, I mean, I just say this one line, that there was a film made on Manisa when he was just a couple of 3 years before he passed, by Gautam Ghosh. And there's a sequence where he talks in his living room looking at the garden. It's a tiny plot outside his house. And he said, every day I wake up in the morning, I look at the garden, I see a ray of light falling on that green leaf. And every day the light is different. And I see meaning in living. Now, somebody who's pushing 80s can say that, which means that that sense of wonder is very much alive and kicking. And I think it is equally important, that sense of wonder, to be there in the person who's looking at art, who's collecting art, as well as who's making art. If that goes, then we are dead.
Thank you. Before we wrap up the session, any questions? We can take one question from the audience because we're a bit late. Yes, please. If you could hand her the mic, please.
Buddy, it's lovely listening to you all, especially Jayashree. I have not really a question, but something that, because I also am an academician along with our practice, I have seen this happening with many institutes where, the person who's an academician, who's going there to share knowledge, I wouldn't say teach, but to share knowledge. And I resonated so much with you, Indrapramit Roy sir, that, somebody who's very good but doesn't have the degree becomes less important versus somebody who has a degree but has not practiced at all. So actually that person, how relevant is that person when exchanging knowledge with the students at an undergraduate level or at a postgraduate level is such an important question. And it's been on my mind since many years. So thank you for coming up with that. And if both of you could really help us come through this difficulty, it would be nice.
Would you
I
like to
really
take this
don't
question?
know whether I can take it or not, but I think different institutes are coming up with a little more independence. So perhaps they may be a center where this could become a reality. Like centers, there
Perhaps.
are universities that are nominated as centers of excellence where there is a little more freedom. We have the same problem in regular academics, but we circumvent it by bringing them in at teachers in at the same salary. This thing, give them a different role, and they don't have to fall within the purview of the number of teachers an institution should have. They are the people we invest in over and above the basic required. So in our schools, we are trying to do that because I have seen that some of the teachers who run my subject labs, we have a concept where we ask children to work out or experiment with what they've learned. Those lab teachers are so much more effective, though they may not have the requisite degree. So a kind of a system could be created where you have people working in studios, a head of a studio or something, doesn't fall within the purview of the requisite number of teachers that a university is required to have.
Yeah.
Well said. I think the only thing, I think the confusion begins with the terminology itself. When you say academia, you see there are two very different models of academia. And the bureaucrats are constantly confusing one with the other. One model comes from Plato's time, when the Greek academia meant that you are supposed to learn reading, writing, reasoning, mathematics, philosophy, and a little bit of religious studies. That is one model of academia. The academic model, the academia model that art colleges followed, come to us from Renaissance, post-Renaissance guild system, and the Accademia del Bell'Arti in Italy. That is a sort of hands-on thing, which later also artists like Michelangelo or Leonardo, or much later in England like Joshua Reynolds said that we are academicians in the sense that we are not just craftsmen, we are thinking artists. So there is an element of reading, writing, thinking, researching, all that comes into this. But this tradition has been there in the East. There is, if you look at Japanese art, the Wenjen or the thinker artist is a very old category. Unfortunately, we conflate these two models of academia. When we say academia or academic, what you have in mind and what the next person who teaches another subject, a mainstream subject, has in mind are actually two very different models. And we have to find a way to bridge this gap. That is the problem at the philosophic level, because I've really looked at it long and hard. And this is the only problem at the source, that how and what defines an academia. You see, the models that we have are very different. And that problem has not been resolved. What we do end up is papering over by trying to pretend it's one academia is the other academia. But it's not. It will never be. So we have put a premium on PhD. We haven't defined what kind of a PhD is required by artists, or if it is at all required. Is it a written thesis? Can there be a postdoctoral, a doctoral study without the written thing being a main component? We haven't thought about it, discussed it, debated it, nothing. Somebody somewhere decided the PhD is a must. We have swallowed the bait and trying our best to bend backwards to fit into that model. So that is exactly what I mean by saying that the stakeholders are not consulted. Things are decided at a level where there is little or no understanding. Forget about the idea of the two models. Even the basis of what makes an artist, what is artistic research, these things are never clarified, never debated. We just have these nomenclatures floating around. So you grab it, use it, write a paper, well, you're there. So I'm sorry for being so negative, but this is one aspect of the academia that I find absolutely soul-killing and detrimental to art education. And I've said this before, I'd say it again and again and again, till my end, that this model that we have chose is a faulty and a problematic model. And the fault lies in what model you have in mind. So you have to start from there and
Thank
not
you.
paper over.
Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Thank you so much for giving your time.
Pleasure is ours.
And we hope to do this sometime again soon.
Thank you.
Nice to be in the same panel with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such an insightful session. We would just like to invite you for a panel photograph, please. We are starting our next panel, which is talking about South Asian art with, again, a stellar panel. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back together for that. Thank you.